Hello everyone and welcome back to another review video, this time for a 2021 indie game release, Death's Door. This game was developed by Acid Nerve and published by the beloved publishing company Devolver Digital, which specializes in identifying indie talent, I believe. You know, they have a lot of great games under their belt, and Death's Door is an action-adventure game presented in a mostly isometric slash over-the-top camera point of view, and combines Metroidvania exploration elements along with puzzle solving and somewhat Souls-esque type of combat system that forces the player to study enemy and boss patterns and make use of the best type of weapons to exploit different weaknesses of the enemies, and of course knowing how to time and dodge commands from the enemies to avoid being hit. Story-wise, in this game, you play as Crow, or they call it Reaper as well in the game. So the Crow that you control works for the offices of the Reaping Commission, along with other crows. These crows are tasked with collecting souls in the real world. But the one that you control is tasked with collecting a giant soul at the beginning of the game, which sort of kickstarts the tutorial and first level of the game, and of course consequently the first boss battle. Once you defeat this boss, you recover the giant soul, but this soul is in turn stolen from you, so you are stuck with the mission of recovering it, which will require your character to recover I think 3 other giant souls from around the world in order to unlock what's known as the Death's Door. And that's how you will get the original giant soul from your original mission. So this premise allows the game to open the world for you to explore in order to collect all these giant souls, but strictly speaking about the story of the game, there are more developments that are very interesting as you progress towards the end. As usual, I won't spoil anything, but I have to say I was pleasantly surprised at how the game handled the story and how it managed to create an interesting lore with such minimal presentation, since the game doesn't really rely at all on cinematic sequences or profound voice acting to convey the story to the player. Graphically, the game gets the job done as best as it can, since we have to remember this is after all an indie title. It's presented in an isometric over-the-top view with 3D characters and environments, as I mentioned earlier. The game, for the most part, uses dark and monotone tones, for the most part, to convey an eerie, gloomy, and lonesome type of atmosphere, which jives really well with the overall story and presentation of the game, and of course its themes. The offices of the Reaping Commission, for example, it acts as a sort of hub world, and I really liked how they kept it in a dominant black and white presentation for that area of the game. It just adds to that gloomy atmosphere, in my opinion. There is some contrast in some levels in the game that have ample selection of colors in their environments, but for the most part the developers did a really good job of providing a mysterious and adequate atmosphere for what the game aims for. The user interface in the game is minimalistic, which helps with the presentation in my opinion. And of course the performance in this game is excellent, with 60 frames per second as the norm, which makes gameplay stand out. It is important to know that I played the PC Steam version of the game through GeForce Now, so this was a very interesting, I guess, experiment on my behalf, in the sense that I basically streamed the game, and I had no issues with any input lag or anything like that, which is critical in games like this that have like a very challenging combat system where you rely a lot on good timing and dodges and all that. So I guess shout out to GeForce Now for working normally, and nothing too crazy in terms of input lag at all. As far as the soundtrack, is also very well suited for this game and focuses on somber and simple tunes that add to the atmosphere of the game. So in my opinion, there's nothing to complain in this department. No voice acting. The game is kept to a minimum, so that goes along with the character of the game. And finally, gameplay is another high point for this game. As I explained previously, the game is action-based in its combat and has some like sprinkles of Souls games in my opinion, since you, the player, will have to learn enemy patterns and timing to perform, rolls and dodges, and of course learn the pros and cons of the weapons you use along with their abilities. Some weapons are faster than others, in terms of how many hits you can get per second, but at the same time they're weaker in strength. So, you have to find a good balance between the different weapons that you find throughout the game. You also have the option of long-range combat thanks to a bow that you carry in the game, as well as making use of magic to attack enemies. So I personally found the base sword weapon of the game to be perfect, the one that you start the game with. It almost strikes a perfect balance of strength and speed. But the key, in my opinion, is to have a varied strategy by combining physical attacks along with long-range attacks. Magic was, in my opinion, very important later in the game. You are able to level up your character in certain skills such as movement speed, strength, magic power, etc. And it was fun trying to decide which category to level up, since the points to do so are not very frequent in this game. And to make matters worse, I feel like if you want to call it that, it feels like the leveling up in this game is very small. So for example, if you increase, say, the speed of your character, you will notice a difference, but it will be a very small difference, almost like negligible. Your character is a little bit faster, but not a whole lot faster. So these differences add up and can make up a big difference later in the game, but you have to keep leveling up that same skill category, and other upgrades as much as you can. So I found that upgrading the dodge speed is critical early in the game, as well as having strong magic attacks, for the later in the game, to have just the long range options for fights later, in difficult enemies and bosses and whatnot. You can also have the ability to upgrade your health and magic, points or meters by finding secret shrine locations that I have to admit are very well hidden for the most part. However, if you're like me and you enjoy spending time exploring every nook and cranny of the world, then you will surely run into most of these secret shrines, which will greatly help. The game is overall challenging and hard by nature. You will find yourself fighting either sections of certain bosses over and over again, since your character by default has very few health points, and the enemies themselves hit hard in the game. Your patience will definitely be tested, but a great feeling of accomplishment will follow the many frustrations that you will experience by dying over and over again. The world is laid out in several sections that will take you to, I guess, different dungeons. There is a Zelda-like approach to this. There's some familiarity that you will find if you play the Zelda games, as well as familiarity with the Souls games, in the sense that you will be unlocking shortcuts around the world that are very familiar to those that play From Software games. There's also a Metroidvania element in the gameplay, since you will be doing a lot of backtracking, both to progress through the game normally and to pick up items that were in previously inaccessible areas of the game previously. One complaint that I have is that the game does not feature a map, and this can create a lot of frustration. So I understand this might have been a deliberate choice to maintain the challenge in the game, but in my opinion, this is not a good way to do things. It becomes especially frustrating if you're after the collectibles in the game. It would have been nice to at least keep track in the map for the collectibles that you already found. It's just a little bit frustrating, but a map would have really helped with the setup of the game. The challenge in this game can also relate to non-combat components, which include puzzle solving and some minor platforming and navigation of certain segments in the game. It takes about 10 to 15 hours to beat the game. However, you can go back to it after you end the game and watch the credits to get the real ending, which is pretty cool because it extends the gameplay value and time of the game. And obviously, anything that adds replay value is always a plus. Although I have to say, figuring out how to get the real ending on your own is pretty ridiculous, and I fully recommend using a guide to go through this process. Overall, Death's Door was a very pleasant surprise and one of my favorite games of 2021. Despite its challenging nature, the game felt fair, and the combination of the fun combat system, the exploration of the world, and the mysterious, characters and world that you encounter throughout, the story of the game, creates a very solid package and experience. I highly recommend you guys try this game. I really loved it, and I can't wait to see what else Acid Nerve, the developer, has in store in the future. So with that being said, this is the end of my impressions. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.